how do you build a strong and sexy core? Let's chat about it.
Don't you want to look good naked?
So when it comes to core training or ab training, we want to think about how we can build a core that's both functional and strong, but also looks good, right? So if, a lot of people say that abs are built in the kitchen or abs are made in the kitchen. I kind of disagree with that. I think that abs are revealed in the kitchen, but they're made in the gym or during your training. So if we want to build a core that's both functional and strong, like I mentioned, but also visible so we can see our abs, we need to build up our core and focus on movements that, just like any other muscle, focus on movements that train our core through its full range of motion, and focus on also, if the goal is to see those ab muscles, that we focus on our diet as well. Let's talk about a few things to focus on if you want to build a core that is both strong and nice to look at. So the first thing to think about is something I think is super underrated, is just breathing and bracing in general. So how to properly brace, not only when you're under load, but also to build kind of those deep core muscles within your stomach. So proper breathing and bracing is something that you can actually practice. And one way to practice is just thinking about doing a deep belly breath. So breathing deep into your belly and really focusing on kind of engaging those deep core muscles. That is something that can help you to just kind of turn on those core muscles that you might not be used to, right? So just breathing in and out, deep belly breaths. Sometimes you can just think about doing like 5 breaths in and out, deep into your belly, and really feel kind of your diaphragm expand. Because that's something that people don't think about too. Your diaphragm itself is its own muscle, and that's going to help you to create kind of that strong core as well, deep in there. Another thing to think about is nasal breathing. So breathing through your nose is something that a lot of people forget to do. So that can help you to not only brace when you're under load, but also to create more stability within your core musculature as well. And that brings me into point number 2, is if you want to build a strong and functional core, think about lifting heavy shit. So compound movements where you have a barbell back squat or a deadlift, where you're picking up heavy loads and you're actually putting your core under loads where it needs to actually stabilize, right? So that's important to think about in terms of if you want to build stability within your core. It's not just about doing, planks and things like that, but think about lifting heavy weights. When you put yourself under those heavy loads, you're actually forcing your core to do what it's supposed to do, which is create that stability within your entire body and to protect your spine. So if you're looking to increase your core strength and your functionality, lift heavy shit. Now, if you want to focus on, really seeing your ab muscles, or that 6-pack as people refer to it, that's gonna be, coming from training your rectus abdominis muscle. So that's the main kind of core muscle that is superficial. That's the one that everybody refers to as your 6-pack, or if you have an 8-pack or 4-pack, whatever it is, that is what you want to focus on. So the main exercises that are going to train your rectus abdominis are going to be exercises where you are flexing your spine and trunk and extending. So just think your traditional crunches and reverse crunches. So those are mainly going to be training spinal flexion. And so those are going to be the ones that you want to make sure that you can progress with. So again, just think of your abs as another muscle group, right? You want to make sure that you can add load and progress and train them through their full range of motion, but also add weight, right? Because that's going to be important when we think about training that muscle and also implementing progressive overload over time. So some variations for crunches, you want to think about the movements that you're bringing your sternum, so the part right here, to your pelvis, right? So you're crunching down. So things like cable crunches, those are great. Weighted crunches on the floor, those are going to be thinking about bringing your sternum to your pelvis. And then reverse crunches is the opposite. So think about bringing your pelvis to your sternum. Those are going to be things like, traditional reverse crunch, whether it's from a floor or a bench, or you're doing hanging knee raises. Those are a form of reverse crunches. So that's going to be training, again, that spinal flexion or that trunk flexion movement. Something you really want to focus on when you're doing crunches and reverse crunches, though, is that you're flexing at the spine and not at your hips. So just make sure that when you're doing your crunches, you are focused on training those ab muscles, those rectus abdominal muscles, and you're crunching down and shortening the muscles and then lengthening them versus trying to basically crunch your whole body together, which would include a lot of hip movement as well. You want to pick movements that you can load and that you can progress over time. So just doing hundreds and hundreds of crunches like on the floor or whatever is probably not going to be a good idea. Yes, if you're a beginner, starting there can be a great place to start. Things like cable crunches are great because you can add weight there. You can do weighted crunches, and then reverse crunches. You can start with a reverse crunch, maybe flat on the floor, and then increase an incline bench to make it harder. Other than the rectus abdominis or that six-pack muscle, we do have our other core muscles, so external and internal obliques, and our TVA or our transverse abdominis muscle. So there's a few other categories of movements that I like to incorporate and kind of sprinkle in throughout training, and those would be categorized as anti-movement exercises. So we're gonna go over a few of the different categories of the anti-movement exercises, but it's exactly what it says. You're basically putting your body in a position to resist the movement or an external load. So when you're bracing against an external force and you're trying to resist that force, that's going to allow you to create more stability and strength. So let's talk about the three main categories for anti-movement exercises. The three main ones are anti-rotation, anti-extension, and anti-lateral flexion or carry movements. We'll talk about a few exercises that go into all three of those. The first category we'll talk about is anti-rotation exercises. So with anti-rotation, it's exactly what it says. You're basically resisting rotation or twisting at the spine. So a few core movements that you can incorporate into this category, and some of my favorites would be polyp press variations. So whether that's a polyp press hold or a half kneeling polyp press, those are great for resisting that rotation at the spine. Another great one is a Swiss ball stir the pot. So that one is great for, again, creating that stability while you're resisting that rotation. Bird dogs are gonna be a great exercise for anti-rotation. So adding a band to those is gonna help to resist that rotation a little bit more. Or renegade rows, so doing renegade rows with dumbbells and really trying to keep your pelvis square as you're doing that row up. Those are all gonna be really great exercises for anti-rotation or training the muscles to prevent that rotation or twisting at the spine. The next category is gonna be anti-extension movement. So this is where you're, again, exactly what it says, you're resisting extension at the spine. So these are gonna be all of your hollow body movements, so hollow body holds, hollow body sweeps, hollow body rocks, any of your hollow body movements, any of your plank movements, any of your dead bug movements, those are all gonna be resisting extension at the spine. Body saws are also a great one for anti-extension, and you can really use whatever you have available. So you can use those little slider things if you have those, or I like to just use a towel because it's the same exact thing, but you don't have to spend money on fancy slider things. The last category is going to be anti-lateral flexion movements or carries. So this is going to be basically resisting side bending, and these are going to be things like carries, so farmer's carries, suitcase carries, anything where you're walking and you're carrying a heavy load, whether it's in both hands or one hand, you're basically resisting bending sideways. Another one would be any variation of side planks. And then also if you want to think about any of your unilateral movements. So whenever you are doing single leg movements, that is going to be training that anti-lateral flexion, basically trying to keep your pelvis and spine stable while you're performing those movements. So again, if you want to build a core that is both strong and functional, but also looks good, make sure that you're focusing on your breathing and bracing. Make sure that you're incorporating compound movements into your training and you're lifting heavy shit. And then also make sure that you're going through the different categories to train the different muscles of your core. So spinal flexion and extension, and those different anti-movement exercises that I mentioned. Women, we believe